finally got that damn episode done. Just gonna take tonight and watch a movie. Why not? I already have the damn player out. Let's see. That one's got laser rot. What else have I got? That one was mastered lousy. What else have I got? And that's a crappy pan and scan. And that's a Criterion disc. Why do I like this format again? And welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that, for today, should actually probably be renamed something to the effect of the Not-So-Oddity Archive, or maybe the Nostalgia Archive, or something like that. And I say that because today's topic was actually a decent success. It lasted for over 20 years and sold well into the millions worldwide. I'm talking about the Laserdisc. And I actually have a fairly long history with this format. Now, back when I was a kid, back before DVDs, I wanted a Laserdisc player so bad, and of course, never got one. And despite my family's fairly early adoption of DVDs, I found myself still wanting one. And so a few years later, we're talking 2001, 2002, just as they were being discontinued here in the States, I actually bought a used, very basic, low-level Pioneer unit from about 1989, and I haven't looked back since, even if I have absolutely no idea where I put that unit. Anyway, as far as today's show is concerned, we've done a lot of time with this format before. I mean, look at this season so far. We're only a few episodes in, and we've already done Treasure in Search of the Golden Horse and another round of Laser Karaoke. But it got me thinking, we never have really truly discussed the history of this format, and we've definitely never discussed all the strange little offshoots of the Laserdisc. So, buckle up, kids. It's history lesson / geek out / warm, fuzzy, gooey nostalgia day here at the archive. Again. Oh yeah, and to quote every person on eBay that's tried to sell one of these things, this is not a DVD. The seeds of the Laserdisc were planted in the mid-60s by one David Paul Gregg with the invention and subsequent patent of the transparent recording disc concept. Effectively, the idea was that if a record could be played with a needle, the idea could be pushed one step further and read optically with a low-level laser. After refining and expanding his concept a bit more, Gregg sold the idea to MCA in 1968. Meanwhile, Philips already had an idea for video discs recorded in a reflective mode, and Philips and MCA pooled their resources in 1969 to further this now common project. Philips unveiled the first Laserdisc prototype, or DiscoVision as it was known, in late 1972.
This performance of the movie Jaws is not coming from film or tape at a television station miles away. It's coming from just a few feet away, from a phonograph-like device connected by wire to an ordinary television set, much as those popular video games are attached. Inside is a disc that looks like an LP record. But the disc has no grooves, and its one playing side contains 30 minutes worth of picture as well as sound.
Over the next several years, Philips, and by turn various tech magazines, would announce every so often that the DiscoVision format would be released shortly. However, due to constant manufacturing / quality issues, which never were entirely ironed out, more on that later, it took until December of 1978 for the first DiscoVision units and titles to hit the shelves. At the time, DiscoVision was only available in Atlanta, Georgia. It took until the end of 1980 and a market share buyout by Pioneer for DiscoVision, or LaserVision, the name got revised in the interim, to be available nationwide. It took until mid-1981 for this system to be released in Asia, and mid-1982 for DiscoVision, LaserVision, Laserdisc to make it to the European market. The Laserdisc marked the high point of home video quality to date. The discs were capable of up to 425 lines of resolution and up to 5 MHz of bandwidth. Consumer tape-based formats topped out at around 3 MHz. The original Laserdiscs were capable of 2 tracks of audio storage, meaning a disc could either be in stereo or could accommodate 2 separate switchable mono soundtracks. By the mid-80s, the number of available audio tracks jumped to 4 channels, 2 analog, 2 digital. During the early DiscoVision days, discs were primarily intended to be, and were, in the CAV format at 30 minutes maximum per side for a standard 12-inch disc. This format allowed users to view footage at variable speeds as well as frame by frame. This development allowed for a new, high-tech variation on microfilm and its variants, in which entire newspaper or magazine or whatever archives could be stored on a relative few discs. Another offshoot of frame by frame led to a novel, if rather costly, method of reading department store catalogs. For a couple of years in the early mid-80s, some department stores, like Sears, issued video catalogs to owners of registered Pioneer VP1000 units, or you could just visit the store, in which most individual frames would act as a page of info. When Pioneer asserted control over the Laserdisc project in 1980, in the name of cost-cutting, they made the executive decision to switch the primary Laserdisc playback format to CLV. While this allowed for up to 60 minutes of storage per side, it also meant slowing the rotation speed and doing a little groove cramming to accommodate this extra playtime. The upshot of this is that the playback quality took a minor hit, and you had to sacrifice vary speed, and sacrifice still frames.
It's my father's failing health.
In 1981, CBS Laboratories introduced a filter of sorts called CX. This technology allowed for a nice drop in the signal-to-noise ratio. CX was initially intended for use on LPs, but because of a need for a special, separate decoder to properly exploit the fully extended frequency response, few albums were ever pressed with this technology. However, Pioneer fully embraced CX and started including it on their Laserdisc players, largely because it cut down on picture interference, of all things. RCA did the same with their CED format and made it a requirement that all stereo CED titles use the CX technology starting in 1982. However, Pioneer made no such demand, and CX noise reduction didn't become standard on most Laserdisc titles until the late 80s. Somewhere down the line, probably late 80s, early 90s, Pioneer issued a barcode reader for use on industrial units, allowing near-instant access to specific segments and stills for, usually educational discs. This technology has since been carried over to the DVD. In 1995, the first AC3 encoded, for Dolby Digital sound, titles were issued. The thing was, you needed an AC3 capable deck and an audio receiver equipped with an AC3 demodulator to access the soundtrack. Such home theater setups were still rather rare at the time. The Dolby Digital signal was encoded into the old right analog audio channel of the disc. Older players could play this signal as well, as static. Shortly thereafter, some players and titles were issued equipped with DTS audio capability. The same problems as the Dolby Digital discs also applied to these discs as well. Around the same time, if slightly thereafter, a handful of titles were released in what's known as the squeeze format. These are titles in which the video content is presented in proper anamorphic widescreen. Most widescreen Laserdisc titles, like this, were only the 16:9 or 2.35:1 aspect ratio films presented in a standard 4:3 frame. Of course, by the time the squeeze discs happened, DVDs were already hitting the market.
This is DVD.
In 1996, the first DVD players hit the market. At the time, DVD players started around $400 and discs started at around $20, whereas Laserdisc players started around $300, yet discs started at around $30. Around the same time, PC manufacturers adopted the DVD-ROM technology for their machines. Between this major rollout and relatively low introductory price, which dropped further pretty quickly, DVDs immediately took a major bite out of Laserdisc sales. Despite a few attempts at creating a hybrid DVD Laserdisc system, Laserdiscs simply couldn't compete. The last Laserdisc titles rolled off the line sometime around 2001. Amazingly, Pioneer continued to manufacture Laserdisc players for the European and Asian markets for several more years, the last units being manufactured in early 2009. The main drawbacks in Laserdiscs stemmed from usually the manufacturing. As I mentioned in the first Format Wars episode, most Laserdiscs are actually two single-sided discs that were glued together. The upshot of this is that if there were any impurities in the glue, it could seep through to the reflective layer of the disc, the shiny silver part. This causes distortion in the picture and potentially the audio as well, and creates the most common issue in Laserdiscs. Of course, I'm talking about the dreaded laser rot. Laser rot can also be caused by unclean manufacturing circumstances. Because of the construction and technical needs of the format, any dirt or debris, no matter how small, can cause playback issues. This is one reason why the format was constantly being held back from its initial release in the 70s. Even after Laserdiscs were released, the manufacturing demands of the discs were never completely worked out. Most of the original 1978 to 80 Discovision titles suffer from some degree of decay, and some titles as late as 1996's Eraser have a rather low survival rate. In the most extreme cases of laser rot, often stemming from European discs, sometimes the rot can physically manifest itself in the form of visibly oxidized discs. Laserdisc's other main, if less common, issue is known as laser lock. This is generally caused by dirt or any other debris that made its way onto the reflective layer of the disc before the final clear acrylic coating to seal the disc was applied. If not that, it means either you're watching a cracked disc or your Laserdisc player is getting ready to bite the big one. Regardless, the bottom line leading to laser lock stems from the fact that something is getting in the laser's way, rendering it unable to find its exact spot on the disc. Isn't it rich?
Music video, I can't see it. If the music don't sound good, who cares what the picture looks like? Then Pioneer gives me their Laserdisc player. It's a video turntable that works with a laser beam, and that laser beam makes all the difference, they tell me. I'm a little skeptical, but I listen. I listen to Flashdance. I listen to Barry Manilow. I listen to Raiders of the Lost Ark. I even listen to me, and I sound good.
The Pioneer Laserdisc brand video disc player. Video for those who really care about audio.
There were several offshoots of the Laserdisc, most notably the compact disc. Bet you never seen one of these before. Anyway, where video was concerned, this spawned a bunch of very subtle, kind of internal ones, but it also spawned a bunch of very grand new offshoots. And so, let's look at both.
Three blind mice, three blind mice.
First up is one that kinda sorta applies to existing archive lore. LDG, or Laserdisc with Graphics. Now, we're no strangers to laser karaoke around here, but did you know there was an offshoot that used an extra layer of data to include multiple optional subtitles? The Japanese made use of this for a while towards the end of the Laserdisc's lifespan in an effort to bring undubbed foreign titles to, usually Japanese, consumers. Unfortunately, you needed either an external decoder, or rarer still, a Laserdisc player equipped with an LDG decoder for this.
I don't think the disc will have much of a future, mainly because you can't do your own recording. And once one has played the material so many times, they don't want to see it anymore.
What do you use a disc for after that?
A Frisbee.
Probably the all-time biggest complaint from the average consumer was always the Laserdisc's perceived inability to record. With that, in 1984, the Optical Disc Corporation issued the RLV, or Recordable Laser Vision, system. The discs in question had a purple tint to them and were fairly popular for short-run as well as bootleg Laserdisc releases. However, at around $10,000 per unit, the market was pretty much limited to professionals. In the early mid-90s, Pioneer released the CRV disc, or Component Recordable Video Disc. In tandem with a laser recorder unit, users could record on Laserdiscs contained within a CED-style caddy. At a cost of nearly $40,000 and discs costing about $1,300 each, unsurprisingly, this was never geared towards the consumer market either. Around 1982-83, while working on Return of the Jedi, Lucasfilm bankrolled a setup known as the Edit Droid, in which multiple write-once, obviously, discs could be used together to edit film, kinda like a Laserdisc jukebox. While pioneering the concept of non-destructive editing, Lucas opted not to use the system on that film. He did, however, take some Edit Droid footage to a convention in 1984, which you're seeing here. Only 24 of these systems were ever made. Around 1984, McDonnell Douglas, a company better known for aircraft than AV stuff, inexplicably attempted to create their own video format, Laserfilm. The system, while read optically like a Laserdisc, was to be manufactured using actual film stock remolded into a disc-based format. Unsurprisingly, to say the least, the format never saw a wide release, nor were there ever any titles released. McDonnell Douglas did, however, use it as a proprietary in-house format for still frames and company videos until about 1990. Sadly, not so much as a single picture of one of these discs, let alone any footage, has ever, at least as of this episode, surfaced. A less discussed use for Laserdiscs came by way of all things, the video game industry. In the early to mid-90s, a short-lived movement to bring real video to arcade titles was spearheaded by American Laser Games, unsurprisingly now defunct. Believe it or not, I actually played some of these games growing up, and one game I enjoyed was called Mad Dog McCree, probably the most famous Laserdisc video game. But at the time, my personal favorite was Gallagher's Gallery. Because what well-adjusted kid wouldn't want to play a shooting gallery type game in which you shot at cans of spinach, wedding cakes, and fish tanks with live fish in them? Looking at some Let's Plays on YouTube, though, let's just say the games were a tad inflexible. So much for nostalgia.
Here's some target practice. Go! Nice shot. Lucky shot. Nice shot. Lucky shot.
With the introduction of LaserActive, Pioneer now moves to the next level in the new world of interactive media.
Another attempt at crossing over to the video game market came by way of the Pioneer LaserActive system. Introduced in 1993, the LaserActive was also capable of playing Laserdiscs and CDs, of course, but also LDG titles. As for the games themselves, well, they were few and far between. Only about 20 titles were ever released in the US. Indeed, you'd have more luck with one of the Sega CD/Genesis or TurboGrafx boxes you could pop into the front of the machine. Coupled with the roughly $1,000 price tag and a need for several expensive add-ons like the aforementioned Sega box, or another box for, say, karaoke mic inputs, the LaserActive went belly up by 1995.
And, as if all this wasn't enough,
finally, the first high-definition, 1080p or better, format was a new, at least in 1991, variation on the existing Laserdisc format. This was called Muse High Vision and was released only in Japan starting around 1995. This format delivered up to 1,125 lines of resolution, complete with uncompressed picture and sound, a feat not matched until the advent of the Blu-ray format some 15 to 20 years later. However, at about $1,000,000 or $10,000 per unit, and to the tune of 20,000 yen or about $200 per title, the Muse High Vision was yet another unsurprising failure. However, in the long run, the Japanese have gotten a lot of mileage out of the High Vision name, at least. Well, that's it for today's archive. Join us next time when I microwave a bunch of rotted Laserdiscs just to prove a point.
And the Cheryl Teagues collection isn't just jeans.
Ooh, that chic, you know, so sleek. Isn't that Cheryl? It's gotta be Cheryl Teagues. Ooh, that's wild and beautifully styled. Isn't that Cheryl? It's gotta be Cheryl Teagues.